Hello, everybody, and sorry for the slow start. I'm a little sluggish this morning, but I had to be up super early this morning while being home super late at night. So, here we are today. We are here to talk about racially crafted items, such as equipment, such as leather, and steel armor and shields and stuff like that. I, for one, I'm going to pull up a share for you guys. And I do apologize, I am a little congested today. It does happen. Are you serious right now? There we go. There we are. Now you guys won't be able to see it too much, but this is a pretty big folder. So we're going to talk about racially crafted armor and weapons and why we have them. Well, for one, I like using them because I am sorry to say elves can live up to on the upwards of 750 years from birth. And they do not just die I mean, they do die after 750 years of old age, but I mean 750 years, you're telling me that elves never figured out how to take leather and use it in such a way to where it weighs where it might be stronger but weighs less? Dwarves, in a sense, would not change the weight of their armor in my book as much as they would try to make the armor stronger. They wouldn't care about the weightlessness, as they are pretty much short but sturdy people. And orcs, they just don't care. And humans, well, I mean, we're discovering it's like out of all these different races, we're the only one that's still learning how to walk. I'm pretty sure orcs are in that boat too, and they just don't care. So their armor is weaker. As long as they have armor, they are okay. So why do we have these such things in the world of Paramore? Answer: because I like flavor. I'm sorry, elves, dwarves, orcs, and humans all wouldn't build everything the exact same way. For instance, dwarves live in the mountains. Orcs were pushed back to the mountains, but hate living there. They would like to be probably around some vegetation as well as maybe living in a cave that they did not dig out themselves. Elves love forests, and humans, well, I mean, we just pretty much can live anywhere. So, yeah. So, I basically said the humans would make anything from the book, while the elves would make stronger armor but lighter. Dwarves would actually make the strongest armor they could, and orcs just piece stuff together, which actually does not always go together very well. So that is my justification on that. There is actually some justifications right here. It basically says for elves, the items elves create in their own land are stronger but lighter, even using the same materials. Dwarves, the armor dwarves create in their own land is twice as stronger and weighs the same. The armor orcs create in their own land is weaker and weighs the same. So that's because in the world of Paramore, orcs basically tear apart the armor of fallen enemies and piece stuff together, which you just don't get a happy mix. Piecemeal does actually have a AC value of a +3 though, equal to hide. Now when it comes to of course, also orcs are bigger. They can go on the upwards of 7 feet tall. So they would definitely need bigger armor than what humans could do. Now, for racially crafted items, elves are pretty much, yes, their weapons are kind of weaker, but in a sense, it's a little bit more versatile, and they are lighter. Whereas dwarves are, to make weapons for their short stature are also weaker, but once again, they are actually, that's more for versatile use, to where it's used towards an advantage of their size. That's why we have this racially crafted item. Dwarves items, of course, is what you call 2 down +1, which I created this whole thing myself. I did this right here because I figure let's represent how things actually work. So, where do I go with this? Well, let's find out, I guess. Lost my train of thought for a minute. I mean, elves are always trying to make things lighter, as elves are pretty much light on their feet kind of race. Dwarves are always trying to make everything an advantage to their side, so that way they don't actually have any hindrances. And orcs, for some reason, just don't care. And their items end up being a little bit lighter than normal because they just piece stuff together. I mean, this is just default lores, where you just see them. Like if you ever watch Tolkien, I'm sorry, those swords in Tolkien, I mean they're badass, but at the same time, they're sharp on every edge. I never did understand why they had the thick blades that they did. I wonder if that was ever explained. Wasn't explained to me, but maybe someone can explain it to me. I don't know. But that's kind of where I got my idea from. I want to pull this away from my picture, from my avatar a little bit. So, yeah, in a sense, humans just use default stuff from the book. Elves, their stuff costs just a slightly bit more, and they are a slightly bit weaker damage with a more versatile act. For instance, what do I call versatile? Well, let me tell you something. All right, so 1 down is because I created this range of dice right here. Well, let me get this. D4, D6, D8, D10, and D12, which is all what weapons use inside the book of Castles and Crusades. 1 down means one whole entire dice pool down. So if you get a sword that does 1d4, 1d8, it goes down to 1d6. This +1 right here, represents additional damage. So even though that's what I call a versatile move, because even though you go down to here, you can still do a minimum of 2 damage to a maximum of 7 damage. Whereas if you just had the 1d8 like a default human, you can only do 1d8. So that's what I call kind of like a more versatile effect, because no matter what, an elf still does a minimum of 2 damage. So their weapons are essentially stronger even using the lesser dice. And they're also, if you check the EV here, which is encumbrance value, they're also lighter. Which, I'm sorry, that's just way better. That to me is showing a way better construction. Okay, so dwarves, because of their short stature, but their sturdiness, they go 2 down +1. Now, what does this represent for the dice pool? So if you have a D8, it goes down to, let's count 2 down. 1, 2, a D4. What does the +1 represent? An additional die. So you go from a D8 to a D4. With that +1, that means you roll 2d4. And I will probably have to show how some of this stuff works. See, this +1 represents, under this dice pool, an additional die. So they're still doing 2 to 8 points worth of damage, while also additional damage of +2, making it a stronger weapon. So if they were at a D12, they go down to a D8, right? With that +1, that's 2d8 +2. That means they do a minimum damage of 4. But a maximum damage of up to 14. Well, no. That would be 10. So 4 to 10. Alright. So let's say longsword is a D8, and we want to give a dwarf longsword. So that'll go down to, we count to 1, 2, a D4 with that +1. That's 2d4. That does a minimum of 2 damage to a maximum of 8 damage. But wait, there's this +2. So you got to add that to both sides. So you got 2 dice here, so that's 1, 2, +2, that's 4. So it does a minimum of 4 damage on the upwards of up to 10 damage. Kind of a bit better than the default, don't you think? And that's not including strength modifiers or anything else of other bonuses that you get. So, and they're also lighter because they're made for shorter people. And then orcs, they just do 1 down, and their weapons are a little bit lighter than normal. So, this to me gives the game a bit more flavor, gives it a bit more of a thing. Now, I'm not saying orcs can't become better than that. Why do they get the short end of the stick? Why is their stuff of lesser value? Well, orcs don't actually live as long as humans and may not have perfected blacksmithing as like humans have. Orcs generally live on the upwards of 50 years. That's generally lore from any tabletop game. I have played Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, 4th edition, and 5th edition. And generally their maximum age is kind of... I've also played Pathfinder 1st edition. And generally their age, kind of like their max age is... And I'm going to pull something up here because I do reference those a lot when creating my own world. even though I'm playing Castles and Crusades. Orcs actually start at 12, and their max age, they reach adulthood at 12. They reach middle age at 20, old age at 30, and a very venerable age at 40. But the maximum they can live is 40 plus 1d20. So anywhere from 41 to 60 years. Whereas humans, they literally reach adulthood at 15, which is 3 more years later than orcs. Middle age at 35, old age at 53, venerable age at 70, and can live a maximum age of 70 plus 2d20, which is anywhere from 72 up to, oh, I don't know, whatever 70 plus 40 is. There you go, 110 years, which is which is honestly longer than orcs by almost double. This kind of like does reflect a bit on their civilization, I feel. You may not agree with that, but you're entitled to your opinion. And just so you know, I don't really care. So, and I only say that respectfully as I can, because I know a lot of people would look at this and go, well, this is completely this and that with everything that's let me tell you about your political views, and let me tell you a bit about your political views. If you want to post some hate stuff to this video, I literally do not care. And if you don't like that attitude, then there's the door. I mean, I'm sorry. I know I don't like getting political, but I don't want no hate things going, well, this doesn't seem kind of fair, blah, 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 blah. Well, life isn't fair, and I just don't care. I grew up as an old school gamer, and this is just flavor. Okay? Take the flavor. You don't like the flavor, then whatever. Not here to start a fight. I really just don't care. I'm here to play games and have a fun time. What's that word from, like, what's that phrase from the 70s? I just want to, we want to have a good time. We want to party. We want to stay up late. We want to get loaded. We just want to have a good time. That's basically all I am in today's time. I don't care about the world. I care about my fantasy world that I develop. That's pretty much all it. There's just been a lot of hate stuff coming in. I make a mention of this in this video because there's a lot of hate stuff coming even across my Twitter page and a few of my servers that I'm on, and it's just like, wow, there's better things to do there's better things to do with our time. Okay, so let me explain how racially crafted items work with classes, because this was a question I actually had from one of my players who was very concerned by this. Because we do play Castles and Crusades, and we do follow, there are 2 classes that have restrictions on armor. So let's go with the first one, and I want to make sure I have this right. Yes, it is currently assassins and rogues. So assassin and rogues have this restriction that they can wear leather armor, padded, or a leather coat without penalty. That's because it's considered light armor. And I just read that straight from the assassin. I'm going to check the rogue, make sure that's still the same thing. Yes. And that is because that is armor that gives a maximum bonus of a +2. So one of my players asked me last night, how does this work with elven leather? Well, elves just found a way to create the leather in such a way where it's still lighter. It is still, like, if you want to be honest, it's stronger, a bit more sturdier. So yes, it grants, because the way it is also worded in the book, which I don't like, so the penalty is equal to -1 for each point above armor class 12 that the armor confers. So if the armor so you take your dex out of the equation and put in the fact of, okay, so you have 3 pieces of armor. 2 of them are +1, which puts you at 10 plus 1, which is 11, and then 1 puts you at 12. And then anything beyond that takes you, anything beyond that you take a penalty for. Well, here's the thing. For racially crafted items, it is different. Okay? They are still restricted to the leather coat, and what was the other one? And the padded leather. They're still restricted to that, but they're given yes, and here is where my player had a problem. So the way I constructed the flavorful system, because they could do padded leather, leather coat, or leather armor, but because my flavor does this: leather armor for an elf, for any armor for an elf, you get a +1 and a -1 to EV. Here we go. This is where, this is where it is. So padded leather goes from a +1 to a +2 with an EV of 1. Leather coat, an elven leather coat has got an AC of a +2 with an EV of 1. And then leather armor has an AC of +3. Because an elven make, you get a +1 to AC, but a -1 to EV. Encumbered's value has no mechanical value here other than the weight class. However, he is also an elf. So here's where this is more of a story element. Elves would make armor stronger while lighter at the same time to create a more dexterous character. Elven rogues are very much, I feel, would be common in any world and should be, as that, in a sense, he is portraying to be a rogue because it's a dexterous class versus a ranger because it's very dexterous, and it kind of, sneaking around kind of does that for like scouts, and it's better at sneak because of the class features for rogue. I totally agree with that. Elven scouts would probably be rogues with the ability to shoot bow and arrows from time to time. So this does not. So even though he would have elven leather armor at a +3 AC, it does not go against his armor restrictions for one thing. For one reason only. Technically, it's not considered magic armor, but because it's racially crafted, it goes against the rules. And that's my house rule on it. If the rule says in the book you can't go beyond armor class 12, but you can wear padded armor, leather coat, and leather armor without penalty, regardless if that is human, orc, dwarf, or elven make, has no mechanical restrictions whatsoever. Those are the 3 armors. Technically, yes, it is written in the rule, but I'm going to rule against that now and go, your character, it states in your character's class as a rogue, you can wear those armor as long as you don't exceed an AC of 12. So here's what I'm going to say. Elven armor is generally stronger, but lighter. And if you're an elf trying to wear elven leather, and you're an elven rogue by chance, and you go to an AC of 13 before adding your dex bonus, that armor is created because technically elves are very dexterous. They're designed that way. I mean, when you create an elf, they get a +1 to their dexterity. So that is more of a race thing than a class thing. And that goes basically towards you. So, I mean, there would be a way to put that towards your advantage. So, yes, the rules do state you can't go above AC 12, but that's for regular, normal armor. With my world, I added a little bit of flavor. So for assassins and rogues, if you were to wear any kind of leather coat, or padded armor, regardless of how it's racially created, it does not go against you. Unless you're trying to wear, I would say, unless you're trying to wear a dwarven leather armor, maybe that would go against you, especially if you're playing as an elf, because those things are made a little bit sturdy. You could actually get them retrofitted for you, but that would also probably add some weight to it if you think about it, because you're adding armor to fit for a larger size creature, as dwarves are generally smaller. That would take some debate to kind of handle that. So, I'd say that's all debatable. And technically, let's see. Racially, dwarf leather is harder then is, you know, dwarf leather is harder than elven leather by natural trade. And it still weighs the same. So if you take dwarven leather and add a little bit to it to fit a character of larger size, I would say pretty much that might add a +1 to the EV, but you would keep the effectiveness of the +2 to the AC for it being dwarven racially, before it being, you know, for it being racially dwarven make. So essentially you kind of broke the system that way, but from my counterbalance, you have to add a +1 to your EV, which would make it heavier. So leather armor, which is +2, and then +4, 14, and we have an EV higher than that, you basically, yes, would take a -3 penalty because it's not elven make. So, now see, leather armor for orcs, I'll get a -1. Which means orcs can't wear, at that point, orcs can't wear regular padded leather or leather coats. And the weight is still the same. So if you were to wear armor that is made for an orc, which is piecemeal, pretty much at this point, it would become piecemeal. Because it also has a -25 gold pieces modifier to that. That would basically become piecemeal, which gives you a +3. Yes, that would count against you too. So, lo and behold, I guess even some items you still can't wear. Because it is all depending on how the modifiers work for how you view things being racially crafted. Now, you can argue, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, I'm a medieval specialist, I don't really think that this is wrong, this is right. Well, you can't make everyone happy. That's all I'm going to say. So to answer a question for one of my players, and I hope he sees this video, because darn, missed the start. Yeah, and I just Colin, I just touched base with the question that you had. This is why I'm doing this video. So, basically, just because elves can make stronger armor than humans just means they had time to perfect the creation process. But remember, they are lighter. So in a sense, I feel that the assassins restrictions and the rogues restrictions for armor would not be broken, just because you can get that extra +1. Like I said, elves are generally dexterous creatures. They get a +1 modifier for creating an elf of anything. +1 modifier to dex. They get +1 to dexterity when creating an elf. So, basically, elf rogues and paramour are going to be so common more than anything. So, well, Colin, you did come in a bit late, and I'm not going to be on a long-winded speech here. I don't know how much more I got left to do, so if you want, just go ahead and rewatch everything that you missed. Alright, I think that's basically everything I can touch base on with racially crafted armor and weapons, and how it affects rogues and assassins with their armor restrictions. Which isn't much, like I said. Just because you get that +1 over AC, it's also lighter than most armor. And the book, when they kind of assign these restrictions, goes off of the armor that's in the book, not the armor that's in the fantasy world. So that is my ruling on that. Well, that's everything I have at this time. Well, hopefully you catch my my other stream that will start here in about an hour and a half. Well, that's everything I have at this time. I want to tell everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. And remember to work hard, play hard, and game on, everybody. Have a great and wonderful day.
Why don't you shut up?
You shut up!